might be able to hear that I'm originally from Edenvale, but I've been in the States for about 19 years, and hopefully I still sound like I'm from the East End and not too American. But as a bonus, Stephen arranged for you to see the sunrise behind me. It's about 5:50 in the morning in Kansas City, and it's really great to be with you guys. So I know I'm the final thing that stands between you in this room and lunch. So I'm going to try to keep it somewhat brief. I did want to try to leave a few minutes for questions at the end. I know the moderator had said that might not be possible, but let's see if we can give it a try anyway. But I'm going to kick it off and really today talk to you guys about some of the things we're seeing in the States around pensions, a little bit of the trends, I think, away from active management towards indexing, and maybe also just talk a little bit about my own background and experience. So I came to the States in '97 to go to Stanford. I studied economics and went to work at Goldman Sachs for about 11 years and ultimately wrote a book called Why I Left Goldman Sachs. And a large part of the thesis, or I should say my discussion in the book, was how and why the financial crisis happened. And you know, I'm very clear that I'm absolutely a capitalist. I believe banking is absolutely necessary. But I think what ultimately causes these, I'd say, bubbles to inflate and burst really is the complexity problem. And it's the fact that even the people running the banks, frankly, do not understand the products that are making a lot of profits. I was fortunate that after I wrote my book, one U.S. senator read my book, and I got pulled into a lot of the Dodd-Frank financial reform discussions in Washington. And it became very clear to me that regulators and legislators themselves don't understand the system. And what's worse, in the States, all of you will know about money and politics and how the Senate Subcommittee on Banking is taking a lot of their financial contributions from the very banks they're supposed to be regulating. So I don't think there are any bad eggs in the system necessarily that are trying to do harm, but I think the system has absolutely become too complex, too jargon-filled, really thousands of times too complicated for anyone in the general public to understand. So what I ended up working on was really the retirement security issue in the States. And through my work in Washington, I started meeting with public pension plans. And, you know, those are the defined benefit plans that teachers and policemen and firefighters in the States rely upon. And I started seeing how, unfortunately, those are going the way of the dodo. And what I mean by that is everyone in this room will remember Detroit going bankrupt a few years ago. We all know that Chicago's pension system is in perilous times. And the other thing I'll mention is that New York City, where I lived for 13 years, you know, the financial capital of the world, their $160 billion pension fund was often in the bottom decile out of all pensions in America. They were paying out $600 to $700 million of fees per year in order to underperform the S&P 500. And I started finding that just absolutely insane. And I was lucky enough to meet the mayor of New York and the comptroller, and I met with the teachers unions. And I put together a 16-page presentation for them, basically showing how if they started indexing a lot of the pensions of the teachers and the police and the firefighters, they would actually stop trying to beat the market. They would at least match the market performance. And what we find is even in the highest ranks of the largest pensions in the world, there oftentimes people are human and they want to find a free lunch, and the politicians and the elected officials are not always funding the pension correctly. And that becomes a huge problem. So I ultimately, about 2 years ago, started focusing very specifically on the 401k, which is really in America going to be the final bastion of what tens of millions of Americans are going to rely on to retire. And what it is it's a defined contribution system where at your workplace you can elect to have 5 or 10% of your salary taken out, and it gets put in a 401k. And you also the video that kind of shows the complexity trap that many Americans are caught up in. So I thought now I would take maybe 10 to 15 minutes and just kind of run you through the American experience. And I know there's going to be a lot of synergies and similarities to how things look in South Africa. And then I'll show you really how Bloom, the company I'm the president of, is trying to fix this problem through making things radically simple. And 10X is sponsoring this event, and we like to think we're making the 401k experience 10 times more simple than anyone else has ever seen. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen with you guys and just run you through quick presentation here. So this first screen I wanted to show you guys is what a Baltimore public school teacher will find on their first day on the job. And this largely is going to be the thing that they're going to be relying on to retire. I know we speak about the U.S. as kind of this beacon of doing things a lot better than the rest of the world, but I thought I'd just give you guys a little bit of a sense of the size of the problem that exists in this country. There is a $10 trillion difference between what Americans have saved and what they're going to need to retire. And that difference exists because public pensions and guaranteed pensions largely gone away. Social Security is not going to be enough for most people. So some of these stats startle people. 1/3 of America has zero savings, not 1 cent saved. The average American has $6,000 of total savings. And the third point I wanted to make is the average American over their lifetime will pay $150,000 of 401k fees, and 90% of people in this country do not know those fees exist. And I wanted to show you the experience that a public school teacher faces. So this is the login screen for their 403b or 401k, and you'll notice fund names like Select, Premium Money Market, Prime Money Market. If I was in the room with all of you, I would ask you a couple of questions. I would say, who works in finance? And almost all of you would put up your hands. And then I would say, who knows what VDOT is? And I've yet to meet anyone that knows what VDOT is. Yet a public school teacher in America is presented VDOT as the 5th choice on their future retirement. Another thing you'll notice on the screen, there are no prices listed, no fees anywhere. You will notice there are far too many choices. I've heard Tracy and Robin allude to this earlier, but in America, there is very much a narrative of you're an American, you deserve hundreds of choices. And I think often it's a bit of a guise for allowing people to wander into bad choices and really end up paying $100,000 or $150,000 in fees without knowing it. And the final point to make is there are no descriptions on this page. Even if you want to know what VDOT means or what the Core Plus means or Select means, you literally cannot find it on this website. You have to find a prospectus. You have to dig through 50 pages. You have to open a new browser and Google it. And that's just not a situation that sets people up for success. So, we like to think about it as a little bit of an analogy to a grocery store. Would anyone enjoy shopping in a shop that had hundreds or thousands of choices? Would anyone enjoy shopping somewhere where it was very, very hard to compare things side by side? No prices listed, no descriptions. We think, in the States at least, and I'm sure there are many similarities in SA, that you may as well be blindfolded. And unfortunately, out of the 90 million Americans that have a 401k, we estimate more than 82 million are literally guessing. And at Bloom, we've now analyzed more than $1 billion of 401ks, and I can tell you that they're almost all significantly screwed up. And what I mean by that are, if there are 10 choices, we'll see many people just put 10% in each choice. Or if there are 12 target date funds, we'll see people put money in all 12. And we know that by definition, a target date fund is supposed to be all on its own. So let's look at a couple real world analogies, that we like to talk about in the States to show the ludicrousness of the problem. If someone's car breaks down in life, does anyone say to us, take this 100-page manual? There are many different approaches. There's active management, there's passive management. You are your own person. I suggest you read the manual, maybe watch a bit of CNBC, and make your own choices. And best of luck, this is what you deserve. Or do we go to an expert? We obviously all know the answer to that question. Another more serious analogy, and God forbid no one in this room needs heart surgery, but in the States, we know for certain Americans' number one financial worry, and close to their overall number one worry is, will they outlive their savings? And when we look at serious physical health issues, and we all know the convergence between financial health and physical health is happening. I think South Africa, in a lot of ways, has been a thought leader in recognizing this with a lot of the preventative measures of, say, Vitality and other companies. But do we ever go to the doctor and have any of these scenarios play out? Number one, the doctor saying to you, well, there are many methods, there are many ways to interpret how surgery should be done. We really recommend you give it a try yourself. The second thing that often happens in financial services, and we think of as one of the great tragedies, is that you need a certain amount of wealth for an advisor to help you. And we could never think of a scenario in life where the doctor would say to us, you just don't have enough merit to meet my service levels. Here is the scalpel. Go handle this, and best of luck to you. Yet, in what we know to be our biggest financial wellness issue, we leave it completely up to people, and that's a huge problem in the States. So I'd like to just kind of spend 2 or 3 minutes telling you how Bloom really tackles this problem. And we do 3 basic things, and everyone in this room has probably heard of the trend of robo-advisors that is playing out around the world. I'm not sure to what extent you guys discussed it in the conference today, but Bloom really has made the experience digital and extremely simple. And we've done 3 basic things. The one is we have replaced complicated charts and graphs with a very simple image of a flower. So we show Americans how their savings are doing using a flower. So if your flower is wilting and has a fly on it, it might mean you are under-risked or you're not diversified enough. If your flower is turning into a Venus flytrap, it might mean you're far too risky. And to us in this audience, that might seem silly or simple, yet most people, when they're confronted, even with words like stock and bond, are completely bewildered and you've lost them. The second thing Bloom does is we use no financial jargon. We use a little bit of a sense of humor, and we speak to people as human beings only in English. And if any of you want to look at our site, it's bloom.com with 3 O's. But I'm going to show you a 90-second demo of really how we tackle this complexity problem. The third thing we do is we've stopped using basis points as pricing. And what I mean by that is 99% of human beings, we believe, do not understand what bips or basis points mean. And in the States, basis points are often used in order to allow inertia to set in. And, why do 90% of people not know fees exist? Because they're never paying anyone a bill. They're never writing a check to anyone. It's just being auto-deducted out of their account. So Bloom is really innovating a new path forward, and we charge people what we think of as a Netflix-type monthly subscription fee. So if you're a new saver, we charge you $5 per month, which quite tragically is about the cost of an expensive Starbucks coffee on this side of the pond. But as you earn more growth, we charge you $19 a month. And our highest price point, which is for people with $500,000 or more, is $99 a month. And you might think that's a bit pricey. And the the truth is we are really not trying to serve high net worth individuals. We are trying to help regular Americans, nurses, bus drivers, teachers, people on the assembly line. And we are frankly not that interested in most of the robo-advisors that are focusing only on ultra high net worth people. So at this point, I thought I'd ask the team if they could please play the 90-second video about how Bloom works.
At Bloom, we like to keep things simple. We start by collecting a few key pieces of information about yourself. Nothing too personal, just the basics. From there, you select where your 401k is currently held. If you don't see it listed, no worries, you can search for it. Next, enter your login and password for your current 401k institution, and presto! Bloom will analyze your 401k across 25,000 different funds. And when we are done, you won't find impossible to read charts with a zillion colors. Instead, the health of your 401k will be represented by a flower. You'll instantly be able to see if your 401k is too aggressive or too conservative, if you have the right amount of stocks and bonds, and if you could reduce the risk and volatility of your 401k. Once we've identified where the problems are with your 401k, we'll even show you how we can fix it with easy-to-understand comparisons. We even let you weigh in on the stock and bond allocation you are most comfortable with. Just grab the slider and make an adjustment. But here's the best part. You don't have to do another thing. Using this algorithm, Bloom will select the right funds in your 401k, and we make the changes for you. Plus, we monitor and rebalance your 401k quarterly. A professionally managed 401k can grow 2 times as much as one that is self-managed. 2 times! Come on, people. It's time to saddle up and take charge of your future. Evaluate your 401k now.
Okay, so I'm going to just wrap up with a few kind of takeaways of how this is all working so far in the States, just to give you guys a little perspective of what's going on this side. So that process you just saw in the video, on average, takes a regular American 4 minutes. We've now analyzed more than $1 billion of retirement plans. What's fascinating and what we're most proud of is if someone even decides to take that 4-minute health check of their 401k, 1 in 4 people become paying Bloom clients. And we think that speaks to the fact that the simplicity and the humanity of the experience is resonating with them. We've grown to almost $350 million of assets, and we're proud to be the quickest growing robo-advisor in history, and the quickest growing in the States in 2016 as well. I will say we're extremely early in our journey. We've compare us to the largest robo-advisors, which have $5 billion of assets, and compare all of us to Fidelity with $3 trillion, and we're still the tiniest bit of mosquito in their ear. But we believe this is the way of the future. You all will have seen that President Obama pushed very hard for fiduciary protections for retirement savers. That's a big benefit for the robo-advisors like us, because we are fiduciaries. We are the highest standard of regulated entity. We have to act in the client's best interest. We're very proud that we brought on Sheila Bair, who was one of the crucial 3 or 4 actors in the financial crisis, as a Bloom advisory board member, and she in fact uses Bloom for her own 401k. We're always proud to show this picture of her with the president and Bernanke really in the room, and she sees the benefit of bringing simplicity and very clear-cut ways for people not to harm themselves to the masses. This is some of our recent headlines. The thing I wanted to mention to everyone in this room is we had a reporter from the New York Times come to spend the day with us, and this reporter, who works in the financial industry, had never, ever logged into his 401k account in 15 years working at the New York Times. In a few minutes, Bloom was able to save him $775 in fees, and compounded over 20 years, we saved him $100,000 just because he decided to look under the bonnet of what the fees were and really how he was allocated, which he had never ever changed, which is quite shocking. So at this point, I thought I would stop and really turn it back over. My concluding remarks would be, I think the future of retirement and saving needs to use technology to help people, at worst, not harm themselves. And what I mean by that is not guess, not stupidly pick the highest fee funds that could mean 2 or 3 years less in retirement. Try to help people around the personal behavior elements. How do you stop people from selling on the day of Brexit? How do you make sure people don't let emotions get in the way of something that we know to be a 20-year plus process? And, at Bloom, we, and I know having gotten to know Stephen and really admiring what 10X is doing, and certainly blazing a trail in South Africa, we really believe markets work only over the long term, over multiple years. So at Bloom, when clients ask us, how is your performance over the last 2 weeks, we can immediately tell that that person is an active trader. And if they believe that, we will give them hard medicine and we'll say to them, look, if you're asking us to compare performance over 2 weeks, we must be honest with you. No one can beat the market. The only 3 things we can help you control are your fees, your taxes, and staying diversified and in the market over the long run and slowly moving you out of stocks into bonds. But anything more than that really is gambling. And I know some of the stats got cited earlier, but one of the ones I enjoy a lot is something Tony Robbins mentioned in his book on fiduciary duty, which I would highly recommend. It was an in-depth, excellent book from the motivational speaker that could have been a lot lighter and a lot more fluffy. But he mentions that, and this is the thing I'll conclude on, if you're in Las Vegas and you are playing blackjack, and I used to go to Sun City, and I remember what it's like when you have 20 and you're supposed to get 21. Would anyone in their right mind encourage you to take another card or to hit? And the answer is absolutely not. What would your chances be of getting an ace? Your chances would be about 8%. In any given year, what's your chance of beating the market? It's about 6%. So you have a 94% chance of underperforming the index in any given year by buying and selling stock. Yet so much of society, including more than 50% of American mutual funds, are still in active management. I heard Robin mention that index funds are making great strides here, but as of a decade ago, it was maybe 10%, and today it's still not even 50%. So I think there's a long way to go.